Today, I'm going to talk about self-acceptance and how it is a key component of recovery. I'll also be discussing how I learned self-acceptance in my own recovery path. But before I do that, I want to talk about the other side of the coin, self-deprecation and low self-worth. Self-esteem issues are common amongst addicts, a connection that has been backed by the Robbins and Clark study on behavioral addictions. Compulsive behaviors can mask insecurities and even make people feel more confident. Mask is the key word there. It's a complete facade that has no staying power over the long term. Dealing with the effect of addiction can harm a person's self-esteem and make recovery more difficult. In my own addiction story, low self-worth was a common state of mind going clear back to childhood. I was a clumsy child and very shy. My father would call me an idiot and a nerd. Come to think of it, I never once heard my father say anything kind towards me that I can remember. And as a result, when I did anything wrong, like say drop something fragile or fall off on my bike, I would say things like, "Good job, dumbass," echoing my father's own language. My own personal internal monologue had my father's deprecating tone, and I didn't see any problem with it. For the longest time, I thought this type of self-talk was just normal. In my adult life, low self-worth translated to having imposter syndrome. I was always comparing myself to others and focusing on my weaknesses. So common was this practice that I doubt I could have honestly listed any of my strengths. I had a successful career and nearly 2 decades inside of the field, and I always felt like a failure. I can't code. Others are smarter than me. I am too stupid to get this. I suck at this whole thing. Fueling this whole negative self-esteem was my undiagnosed ADHD, which often made me feel like I was too stupid to pay attention. I didn't have any tools to manage my inattentive behavior, which led me to the conclusion that I was just a fool pretending to do IT work. So pervasive was this attitude that I had difficult time accepting compliments from others because I couldn't see the sincerity in their words. Instead, my dad's voice would stay in my mind. "Oh, look, you finally got an idiot's prize." In my quest to feel anything positive, I leaned on my favorite vice, porn. Porn didn't judge me, and the thrill of sexual titillation eliminated all the negative self-talk. It was always there when I needed it, and oh boy did I need it. Every day, as often as possible. For a large portion of my life, porn was the primary way I could feel happy. In recovery, self-acceptance is important because it challenges the sense of hopelessness that comes from the perceived failures. Self-acceptance means that you accept yourself for your shortcomings. It's a way of embracing everything you are and finding compassion for your whole self. This was a difficult road for me to travel because it was so alien. I didn't know how to work in the self-esteem space. It was akin to learning a new language. I had to learn how to speak the words and then understand what they meant. I also had to believe in what I was saying. So, how do you work on self-acceptance? I'm going to give you a lot of different tactics. Try them all out. But before we go through the tutorials, I want to first pause and tell you this. Whatever you've done, whatever you've gone through, it's not the end of the world. As long as you're on planet Earth, living and breathing, you still have time to work things out. There are a lot of things that you can do to find success in. There are many things you can do to make yourself a healthier person, both in mind and body. And yes, that matters. You can be a better person if you can muster the will to do it. If you choose to move forward, you have to acknowledge that you aren't perfect. Those imperfections are part of who you are. You might be able to work with them, even overcome them, but sometimes they might slip you up or slow you down. From here on out, you have to learn to accept this as part of who you are. Getting mad won't fix it. Getting upset or depressed won't make them go away. Rather, when our flaws show, we have to embrace them as part of who we are.
If we have the desire to change, we must stop wasting our time dwelling on our shortcomings. We must work on embracing who we are rather than despairing. To do this, we have several tools in our toolbox to choose from. Your mistakes don't define you. I think these tools have a logical order. I personally always start by recommending this very simple statement: your mistakes don't define you. The person you are isn't a walking disaster, no matter how inflated those mistakes might be. I've been in a lot of rooms with a lot of addicts, lawyers, psychotherapists, business people, artists, scholars, you name it, all walks of life, who didn't have a nice thing to say about themselves because they had the inability to see beyond their own fuck-ups. It's almost amusing to think about it if it wasn't so sad. People with such rich lives can't see beyond their own failures. But the reality is that we are more than our mistakes. We are parents, community members, friends, and survivors. We are a multifaceted people with complex lives. We'll discuss other tools to help us reinforce these positive attributes in a bit, but first let's talk about challenging the stinking thinking. The second tactic flows right from the first one. We just talked about how you aren't a negative attribute. You are a person filled with life experiences. This person that you are now is a sum of everything you've done. But due to your life's challenges, you may have developed the curse that we in recovery call stinking thinking. Stinking thinking can involve many cognitive distortions, but I'm going to focus on emotional reasoning and personalization. Emotional reasoning is when the emotion you experience becomes your actual outlook. So, if you were feeling inferior to a coworker because of something they did at work, you might feel like a second-rate person for the rest of the day. Now, breaking down this example, an action caused a change in your mood or self-esteem. The emotion became the reality. In situations like this, a person who rides their negative emotions needs to get into the practice of immediately recognizing that the emotional state has changed and then go through some self-examination about what thought processes may have contributed. Often the problem lies with not challenging preconceived self-perceptions. In the case of this example, the leap into stinking thinking may have been aided by troubles advancing at work or the presence of new employees with higher educational backgrounds. I have a sponsee that suffered this exact same situation, with coworkers who were Harvard MBAs while he had just barely gotten his bachelor's from a state school. As I pointed out to him, what does it say about you that you work with Harvard MBAs? He just couldn't see that the presence in his workplace actually said more about him than it said about them. Getting to the bottom of your emotions will help you confront and rationalize what got you there. Oftentimes, we are quick to jump to conclusions and accept our distorted rationalizations as truth. Think about it this way. You probably aren't going to go buy a house or a car on impulse because there's a lot of risk involved. Yet, many of us will go down a road of destructive thoughts without even giving it a moment of critical thought. Personalization comes when you hold yourself responsible for everything, even if it's entirely out of your control. The internal monologue might sound something like this: I'm a bad person because this thing happened. It's the pathway to inadequacy, guilt, and shame. With this sort of thinking, you have to ask yourself two questions. Am I in control? And am I responsible? Again, the concept here is to slow down and make sure you aren't jumping to conclusions. Emotional reasoning and personalization want to find their negative emotion before the mind gets a chance to sort things out. A person who is fighting these impulses has to start first by recognizing that they are in a precarious emotional state and then slow down to challenge the situation that got them there. I've witnessed countless sponsees working through their issues this way, and I'm happy to report the hard work pays off. You may not always avoid the negative emotions, but challenging your own reasoning will definitely help you to find more serenity from your own self-deception.